This is Marco Royce.
This is Shinji Kagawa.
This is Nuri Shahin.
Hello, this is Jadon Sancho.
And you're listening to the Yellowwall podcast.
Hello and welcome to episode 420 of the Yellowwallpod, and I'm a little bit high myself after today's announcement of Sebastian Aldea. I'm Stefan Butzko, and today we will of course talk about Sebastian Aldea officially joining Borussia Dortmund, and yeah, what else are we going to talk about? I'm not entirely sure yet, but for all those things and more, I guess, to discuss with me are here Lars Pollmann. Hello Lars, it is great to have you on again. How are you doing?
Hello, Stefan. In good old Yellowwallpod tradition, I'm fine but extremely tired.
Okay. And also here, I don't know if he's extremely tired, but I hope he is fine. Matthias Zug. Hello, Matthias.
Hey, Stefan. You know, despite living in Colorado, unlike you, I am not high. But it's good to be back. How are you?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I'm good too. Thank you for asking. Finally, someone asks. Well, as you guys know, I have launched a new format on the Yellowwall YouTube channel. It's called the BVB Update, and I basically take a quick roundup of the day's news. On the days I have time, because obviously it's just a hobby, not a job. But yeah, for everyone who has tuned in so far, I want to thank also for all the very positive feedback. Because it's been exclusively positive, unless I ask my German friends who were like, why are you looking so tired? What's with the overlay? Why is the white border so thick? Etc, etc. But apart from that, the criticism was mostly positive, also from you, Matthias. So thank you for that. But before we continue, we have a sponsor for this episode.
Wir sind komplett schuldenfrei. Wir zahlen keinen einzigen Euro an Zinsen.
And this episode is sponsored by Mark Finke, who is from Ostfriesland. And Mark has sponsored an episode before. So thank you very much for your support. If you also want to sponsor an episode, go to patreon.com/theyellowwall. And thank you for all that support. It really helps, especially as I just launched a new format. These little dollars are helping in that regard. So yeah, what is new today? Let's see. Borussia Dortmund did sign Sebastian Aldea finally. He signed a 4-year deal until June 30th, 2026. And Sebastian Kehl is very pleased to have been able to sign Sebastian Aldea, a seasoned center forward who has recently caused a sensation in the Champions League, but who also knows the Bundesliga in particular and has already demonstrated his class and high quality finishing there. End quote. And then he continues, the overall package is very promising. Sebastian possesses a strong physical presence and he's physically very resilient. I guess hinting at not being very affected by injuries. With his experience, he can also offer and support and stability to our young attacking players. During the talks with us, he made it clear that he has big ambitions with Borussia Dortmund. And in the interview with the club, he already said that he basically wants to chase Bayern down and finish first. So obviously, that's all very good news that it's finally official, and Ajax have also reported, or made public rather, that the base fee for this transfer is 31 million and it can go up as high as 34.5. So Matthias, I've already asked you last time around about Sebastian Haller, so I'm not going to do that. So Lars, you have the microphone now. What are you making out of this transfer? And I'm asking you this keeping in mind that you, I think, preferred Zaza Kalajdzic.
Yep, I'm on record, on Twitter at least, in saying that I would have preferred Kalajdzic, not only but also because of the financial package, which I think is quite a bit of an outlay for a 28-year-old player. Signing a 4-year deal, a fee north of 30 million euros. Let's say you have to be very sure that you are not making any mistakes with that signing. And I guess there's enough evidence to suggest that they aren't making a mistake, because obviously Haller knows the Bundesliga quite well from his time at Frankfurt. remembering back to that time in the so-called Büffelherde with Luka Jovic, Ante Rebic. I think he was kind of almost a forgotten man because he's not necessarily a goal machine, but also probably the guy that made them tick most and a striker that makes his attacking partners better, which is also something he talked about with the club today, or in the video release today anyway, that he, on top of scoring himself, also likes to give out assists as presents for his partners, as he put it, I think.
Yes, he did.
Remembering back to, let's say, 2019, before he moved to West Ham for a fee above 50 million quid, which was obviously prohibitive for Dortmund. I think if Dortmund had signed or had the ability to sign Haller back then, we would have been quite happy with that. So there's no reason to not be happy now in some ways, even if I would have preferred Kalajdzic just because I think he's a massively underrated player. I think both in a sense aren't like-for-like replacements for Haaland, despite obviously playing in that central striker number 9 position. I think that's also part of what I'm a bit wary of. If people expect Haller, especially after his Champions League season last year, to come in and bang the goals in just like Haaland did, then I think they are going to be a bit disappointed because he's never been a goal machine. His best scoring season in the Bundesliga, I think, was 16 goals for Frankfurt, which is obviously pretty good, but not necessarily, especially in this day and age, something necessarily to write home about. And outside of his time at Ajax, which I guess is strikers' heaven in some ways, especially under Erik ten Hag, who's now moved to Manchester United. He's never been, the kind of guy who scores 20, 25 goals consistently over his career. And now, obviously, him being 28 years old, it's not like there's a lot of projection. You pretty much know what you get. And I think that is a very good player, someone who the likes of Daniel Malen or Karim Adeyemi or maybe even Marco Reus still will be able to profit from playing around them, or playing around him rather, him laying it off, being, a focal point of the attack, target man if you like. So I think as long as people's expectations are being kept in check a bit, I think this is a very strong signing, but I just think, signing a 28-year-old for 30 million plus is kind of a departure from Dortmund's normal business model. Obviously, there are some exceptions to that rule, if you will, but it's just something to keep in mind. I mean, if you look at all the other signings they made this summer, all younger, outside of Adeyemi, all a bit less expensive. So, just something to keep in mind. But obviously, if Haller brings to the table what he's shown already at Frankfurt, even in spells at West Ham, and definitely what he showed at Ajax, I think there's a lot of stuff to look forward to.
Yeah, definitely. Why did you prefer Kalajdzic, though? I think it probably was also about his passing, I guess, and getting his teammates involved, right?
Yeah, I mean, Kalajdzic, it's kind of a misperception by people who maybe don't watch Bundesliga enough, but they see a 2-meter tall striker whose goals usually come through the air from crosses from Borna Sosa, for example, from the left side of Stuttgart. And they kind of, have that mental image of him being, a 6-yard box striker who only uses his physical abilities or, his physical advantages, if you will. But, that really doesn't paint the correct picture of Kalajdzic, who's just a very good footballer who happens to be quite tall. I mean, Kalajdzic in his youth and even for Stuttgart at times and in the Austrian national teams wasn't always, the designated target man, number 9, whatever you want to say, because of his, footballing ability, playmaking ability. could easily play as a number 10, which obviously looks a bit funny because, 2 meters tall guy, lanky and all that, doesn't usually play or, doesn't necessarily fit the bill as a number 10 for most people. But, he's just a very, very good player. I dislike the public perception of him, just being that aerial target or whatever. And I think Kalajdzic would have proven people wrong at Dortmund, and I would have liked to see that story. But obviously, it's not like signing Sebastian Haller is, because of my preference for Kalajdzic a bad move or anything.
No, I mean, I would have also been perfectly content with signing Kalajdzic. I think really the only question mark around Kalajdzic is his injury record. And I think this is something that Dortmund did consider, because Kehl did in the press statement really highlight the, physical, whatever it was, robustness, stability of Haller. And I mean, it's going to be interesting because a lot of the Dortmund signings in their first interviews are certainly talking about winning the Bundesliga. I mean, Niklas Süle said it pretty clearly without saying the actual words. Haller said that Dortmund is the biggest rival of Bayern Munich. The goal is to fight with them and be first, asking them why not. So, Matthias, why not?
Jeez.
No, not really. But let's maybe talk about the quotes before I ask you, because he said, in general, I'm happy. I'm proud to be a Borussia Dortmund player. It was a great opportunity for me. I had a few good connections with the club officials and also a few players. Now I'm here and I want to be successful. Dortmund is the biggest rival of Bayern Munich. The goal is to fight with them and be the first. Why not? And then he continues, I'm a strong striker. I try to play simple. My job is to be in the box at the right moment to score goals. I love scoring goals. It's my main ability, but setting up my teammates is also something nice. It's like giving a gift to your partner. It is a nice feeling. Then about the Westfalenstadion, he says, it's an epic stadium, and most of the time the games are epic too. The pitch is in pristine condition. The atmosphere is fantastic. Even when I didn't win here with Frankfurt, even though I did with Ajax, playing in the stadium was always a great memory. The yellow wall is where I want to celebrate my goals. Matthias, what are you making of these quotes from his initial interview with the club?
I mean, it's all kind of bog standard stuff that you would expect.
But he did point out the pristine pitch, which not all footballers do, which is something that I appreciate.
Okay, the grass is nice. Cool.
Yes.
I mean, I honestly, I've gotten to the point where I am so jaded about every single interview an athlete or celebrity or anything like that gives, because I just feel like it's so schooled anymore that I'm just like, meh. Maybe it's just my cynical nature overall, but when it comes to, the question of why not finish first? Yeah, I mean, why not? May as well. If nobody else is going to do it. No, it's fine. It's a first interview. I'm curious about players to see how they react when things are not scripted or when they're not perfect, when their backs are against the wall. That's really what I care about. And obviously we'll only know about that in a few months.
So obviously I personally would prefer, instead of having a nice, interview that's sort of scripted and set by the club and where players can sort of just say whatever they want without having the fear of, offending anyone, or they can offend someone by, greeting their old club in the Borussia Dortmund magazine. But Matthias, if there were a player conference or news conference with a new player, I would have loved to ask why he only signed a 4-year deal, whether the club did not want to give him more years, or whether he didn't feel like a 5-year deal or commitment was the right thing to do. So since he isn't here, Matthias, I'm asking you, do you think it would have been even better had it been a 5-year deal instead of a 4-year deal? Or are you content with the deal he signed considering his age? I'm
going to give the latter as my reasoning why I'm okay with a 4-year deal. given his age. I mean, he'll be in his 30s by the time the contract would come to an end. Add another year, I get it, resale value. You can, because honestly, the way most of these contracts work, excluding people like Nico Schulz, is that they're effectively 1 year less than what's on paper, because most clubs don't want to just let someone leave on a free. So the decision on keep or sell happens a year before the nominal contract end, because then you can get some money. If that's the case here, as it would be, you look at 4 years, so it's 3 years, you're still in your 30s, then I'm okay with it, especially if you're looking at, in the meantime, bringing in or cultivating a younger striker after that, also maybe to learn under him. I think it makes sense. 5 years pushes it further into his 30s, and then reselling him and trying to recuperate any of that transfer fee becomes harder. So I'm perfectly fine with a 4-year deal.
Lars, do you have a difference of opinion there?
No, but I kind of feel like it's become a bit of a club policy this season, because unless I'm entirely mistaken, Salih Özcan and Nico Schlotterbeck also signed 4-year deals. Not entirely sure about the other ones, but I seem to remember Özcan and Schlotterbeck holding up jerseys with 2026 on them. So
no, it was Zule who signed till 2026. Schlotterbeck is there till 2027.
But Özcan is 26, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, okay, so you can see there's a bit of a
offset maybe between the
I kind of feels like they were burnt a bit by big money signings such as Nico Schulz, who didn't work out, and you have them on your payroll for that much longer. I mean, obviously at this time of the year, most people are incredibly excited about everything that club does, because there's nothing to get that back down to earth. But
there's not the dooming disillusion of hindsight yet.
Yeah, I mean, chances are it's a bit like the NFL draft, unless you're a fan of the New England Patriots and they select a guard in the first round. Most teams or most fan bases are quite happy with the draft haul, at least after a couple of days. But I mean, obviously, even more so in the NFL than in soccer, if you will. That not all of these draft picks or signings in football will work out. I mean, the last time Dortmund fans on a whole were this enthusiastic about a transfer window was probably 2019, when they signed Schulz, Brandt, Azar and Hummels. And I mean, that doesn't look too good 3 years later. And I guess there's a quite convincing argument to be made that Dortmund's best 11 doesn't include a single one of those guys next season, and that's just, as I said, 3 years down the road. So obviously one of these guys they signed now is probably not going to work out, unless it's a huge outlier in football statistics or whatever. So in that sense, it makes perfect sense not to have the entirety of your signings on 5-year deals, given the prospect of presumably at least one of these guys not working out and you having to pay for them that much longer. So
yeah, also on the flip side, if all work out, then you are in danger to lose them all in the same contract year, basically, which also can cause a headache. That's also a point. I think if you look, for example, at Borussia Mönchengladbach at this point, I think they have like a dozen players with contracts running out in 23, and that includes guys like Jan Sommer, Jonas Hofmann, Alassane Plea, Marcus Thuram, and a few others. So, kind of a spine of the team almost. Lars Stindl as well, Christoph Kramer, so really important players. And in one aspect, they are kind of in a deadlock right now, because they have to sell some of these guys. Breel and Bolo, another one.
but as long as you don't know whom you sell, you also don't know whom to extend and whatever. So it kind of cripples them in on the transfer market this year, even though the contracts are running out in almost 12 months. So as you said, it might be better to stagger those a bit. And I think, especially in case of Aldea, it's also just the age factor. I think if he were 25, they might have pushed for a 5-year deal just out of convenience, because obviously they are quite convinced paying up to 34.5 million euros for a player. They don't expect him to be the one not to work out. So they would have probably gone for a 5-year deal, but given his age, that probably just made more sense.
So, Matthias, I don't know if you've watched the BVB update, but in one of those episodes, I presented that, the breaking news that the Africa Cup of Nations was moved to January/February of 2024. So that means theoretically, and I guess in practice too, the next season's Rückrunde, at least the beginning of it, would be without Sebastian Aldea. So, my question then follows is, do you think that Dortmund now in the next transfer window, because I can not really imagine them doing it now, should, try to sign yet another striker? Maybe someone a little younger, a bit more, I don't know, just a bit more of a talent? Or do you think that grooming Moukoko and extending his contract is going to be enough to make up for that?
Well, I mean, we had talked about the African Cup of Nations when last we met, and I voiced my concern there, just because every time, well, not so much anymore, but in the past, you look at a team like Liverpool. I mean, two of their 3 best players would be gone for like a month in the hardest time of the season. And for Dortmund, that means obviously then this season, it's not going to be an issue beyond just this abomination called the Qatar World Cup that everyone has to deal with. So it's not Dortmund specific. In the next season, I would say you've got time. So it's a matter, I don't think that's a question we can answer right now, because because Aldea's going to miss some games. You're going to have to rest him. Maybe he'll be injured. You've got the recovery time after the World Cup, things like that. Granted, I don't even know if Ivory Coast is at the World Cup, to be honest. Off the top of my head right now, I haven't really been paying attention to this one. But you'll have to see if someone like Man, Adeyemi, Moukoko, and so on can fill in that role in a way that is dependable and productive. If that's the case, then you may not have to sign someone for the following season. But Dortmund do have to look at a younger striker, let's say under the age of 25, in the next 2 years, just because of Aldea's age and the contract structure and having options and playing ideally in all competitions for a long period of time every season. It's something they'd have to do anyway. It's probably not going to happen this season, maybe in winter, depending on how things perform. But I think that's something that Kehl and co can kind of push until next summer at this point.
Yeah, all right. That's pretty much the answer I expected, to be honest. So, Lars, we have a nice listener question, and it's from @JFWUND, and he or she asks, what, if anything, can we take away from today's friendly against Luna SV? And I know you've watched this game with riveting effect, so Lars, please tell me your great takeaways.
No, I'll gladly answer the question. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. I mean, it was the debut of Alexander Meyer as their second goalkeeper, who obviously had nothing to do against a 6th division opponent while still conceding a goal. Not his fault, but, kind of an introduction to Dortmund, I guess. Other than that, they basically played a conglomerate of a few first-team players, a lot of under-23 guys, and even some under-19 guys. So these are players that we most likely aren't going to see beyond maybe the first round of the Cup, because that's already at the end of July and only 3 weeks in for the returning international players. So that might be a bit too early for some of them. So I suppose against 1860 München, there might still be a bit of a weird mix. But I mean, nobody should grasp at straws and try to make any snap judgments after the first preseason game. I mean, maybe if Luna SV employed some goals to feed off their pitch and the playing surface being somewhat acceptable, maybe you could say, I don't know, Prince Anning, the new left back or left winger for the under 23 team, is really good. But I mean, he looked good, but who's to say how that would look in a more professional environment? So it's nice for Dortmund to play against an amateur team from a neighboring, I don't even know, is that a town or is that a part of a town? I'm not too savvy on my
I think Lune is its own town.
Geography right now, yeah. So it's nice for them to show their faces at an amateur ground, and other than that, let's not try to make any assumptions after these incredibly boring 90 minutes, let's face it.
Well, you see, I have a takeaway, which is something I probably didn't need this game for. However, is that this preseason is going to be incredibly tricky. I mean, if you rattle through the signings, Sebastian Haller, Adeyemi, Schlotterbeck, Özcan, Süle, Lotka, Meyer, and so on, then it was only Meyer, I think, who has so far shown up to this preseason, and everyone else will start with the performance diagnostics on, I guess, either Friday or Saturday, and then on next Monday will be the first public training session with all the new guys, which I think will also include Gio Reyna, by the way. At least that's what Edin Terzic said after the game, which also is interesting to know, and hopefully Gio Reyna will be fit enough to actually then also train. And on that note, I guess I can also say that Marco Royce has been back on a training field, training individually, coming home a bit sooner from his vacation. So I think has Gregor Kobel. But yeah, Matthias, obviously there's a big buzz around Borussia Dortmund right now because of, the clear transition they're going through and all the new signings. I mean, the announcement of Aldea on Twitter was widely celebrated, and I watched some Ronach videos earlier today, and they are really reporting that there's a buzz around Edin Terzic, that fans, especially local fans, really want his autographs and whatnot, and there's a big crowd around him. So how do you think Terzic and Borussia Dortmund overall can manage the, trickiness of the preseason that sort of bleeds into the new season, having to formulate a whole new team and also trying to keep and moderate the euphoria alive, because match day 1 in the Bundesliga is Leverkusen, and right now I'm not that optimistic.
Well, if I remember correctly, Dortmund had Leverkusen once start off season, lost 1-0 and ended up winning the Bundesliga.
They lost 2-0. I remember it vividly because I was sitting on a toilet watching it because I had diarrhea, and I remember seeing both goals.
You could have just said, I remember watching it. We all would have been perfectly fine with that description.
But I needed to share that. That's just me coping with bad experiences.
Be that as it may. Yeah, I mean,
it was a shitty game. What can I say?
Hey, but the season was fine.
Fine, he says.
Fine, yeah.
It was excellent.
Of course it was. But that all being said, yeah, I mean, preseason for me, I've said this many times. I've been saying this now for 10 years. No pun intended, don't give a shit about preseason. The main thing I care about is don't get hurt, don't embarrass yourself, and just get out there and play together. really an indication of where things are going, I tend to look at it as once we hit October. And obviously the season is starting on, well, it's in a month, almost exactly from, isn't it? Right? The 6th of August. Is that Dortmund's first game against Leverkusen? If I remember reading that correctly. Somewhere around there, which is a month from today when we're recording it. So there's not a lot of time. So you got to try things and test things. So you're probably going to get suboptimal performances in these test matches, which is just the way it is. I don't even know when the first DFB Pokal round is being played right now. That's how well prepared I am right now. But it's going to come fast. And so you kind of have to make things click quickly. The good thing is Dortmund aren't unique in this. Everybody in the Bundesliga, everybody in European football is dealing with this because of what's happening in the winter. And so everyone's kind of in the same boat. So I wouldn't over evaluate it too much if the beginning is a little bumpy, especially with the not high expectations, it's high euphoria. I think the expectations are still Dortmund aren't going to win the Bundesliga. I think that's the general expectation. So really nothing's changed. You just don't want to dampen that euphoria too quickly before the icky weather starts hitting. So, and then you've got that long break in the middle to kind of deal with the negativity or hopefully positivity in the meantime. But it's just going to be yet another weird season, third in a row that we get to deal with.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame. So, anywho, at Dortmund India writes on YouTube, love the daily updates, had a question because Tasic said there will be more movements. Where do you think, other than left back, is the club looking for more signings, Lars? To me, a very interesting question because it feels like the left back position is like the only transfer rumors you get. But do you think that Kiel needs to pad any other positions?
I'm not even sure. I think they definitely need a left back. Even if Schulz were to be taken off the payroll, I think given that they have Tom Rote and also signed Prince Aning, kind of would make sense to keep one of them or around for the first team and the other getting experience either at the under-19s in terms of Rote or under-23s with Aning. I'm not a huge fan of David Raums, especially not for a 30 million outlay. I just think that's not really realistic in this summer after the spending they've already had. But yeah, I realize that that's something that's been talked about so much that there's probably something to it and talked about by enough sources. So there's seemingly strong interest. So I have to see how that goes. But other than that, I don't really see any real opportunities for at least for proper first team players. So guys that you would expect to be in the 20-man matchday squad or whatever. I know people have talked about maybe signing another center half. You guys already talked about potentially a backup for Haller. I kind of think they don't really need anything at this stage. But if there were an opportunity to, add the next 17-year-old whom they expect to explode in maybe a couple of years or whatever, then that's never a bad idea to add those guys. I think would probably make more sense if that someone were to be, a natural winger, just because that seems to me the spot in the team that's at least strong from a numbers perspective. I mean, Adeyemi is not a pure winger. Azar might be gone. So that basically leaves Bino Gittens as maybe their only natural winger. So if they could get another Bino Gittens, which is obviously quite difficult because he's an amazing talent, then that would make sense. But I basically think when Terzic was talking about transfers, he mostly meaning outgoing business. And if there's enough of that, maybe they have an opportunity to sign Raum. But
realistically, who would you like to sell on? Because yesterday Sport 1, for example, wrote that there are clubs interested. Cryptically, they wrote in Nico Schulz, for example. But I've not seen any, any real rumor about that, to be honest, other than that the Lazio sporting director came out immediately said, I don't want him on my wish list, etc.
Yeah, I mean, whom do I want them to sell? Akanji, because of contract situation, and they kind of, put too many players in front of him. I mean, if he were to extend his contract, that would be a different story, but obviously that's not going, obviously in quotation mark, that's not going to happen. So Akanji should be sold if possible. Schulz, I mean, they can also nix his contract if that's the way to, in quotation marks again, get rid of him. Not meaning to be rude, but I mean, we are at that point basically. Azar, I don't really see an avenue for too much playing time for him. Also been injured too much. I can definitely understand the rationale behind telling Guerrero, if someone were to call, maybe you should think about that, because again, too many injuries, lack of interest or ability in defending, let's put it that way. Maybe Julian Brandt, because he's someone whom they might get a decent fee for, who also might have some issues getting relevant playing time. But I think the big one right now is Akanji, just because they signed Schlotterbeck and Süle, so still having Hummels, kind of no point in keeping around too many center halves with starting 11 ambitions and potential. So selling Akanji would be, the obvious step, and that's also what most people around the club seem to expect to happen. With Schulz, there's this report from Sport 1 you mentioned, but I don't get the sense necessarily that there's anything lurking around the corner necessarily. So maybe if and when someone gets injured at another club, maybe someone thinks of Schulz as an alternative, but that's definitely not something I would expect to happen in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, I'm also not holding my breath, if I'm honest. So, speaking of center backs, I think if we think about any, stopgaps the squad still might have, I think maybe, replacing Akanji, if you will, or Zagadou maybe for that reason, or just having any other fourth center back, I think can help. I don't know how far along Namdi Collins is. The 90 minutes against Lünen were not exactly impressive, to be honest. So, yeah, I don't know. I also don't know how far along Kamara is and whether he can play, either as yet another number 6 or as a center back, as a stopgap player for the pros. That's really hard to gauge right now. And those two positions, center back and number 6, is where I would, try to pad the squad if possible, to be honest. Obviously, ideally, you would also not have another striker, but, I think that if you can make Stefan Tigges work, I also think that you can make Bradley Fink work in the same vein going forward. So I would not be surprised should Aldea or Moukoko get injured that you see him get some first team minutes every now and then. And yeah, otherwise there's not that much on my list, to be honest. Matthias, do you have any other shouts? Obviously, I can't end this without saying that I would also sell on Emre Can immediately. But Matthias, any transfer moves that should be made or could be made on your list?
My opinions on left back, so I don't think we need to retread that. I did just see that it's a done deal with Axel Witsel now being at Atletico. So, he was gone anyway, but that was just an interesting little side note. Other than that, a lot of investment has been made at this point. no one's going to be brought in until a few players are shipped out. And I think that's just the holding pattern we're in. But there are also plenty of clubs out there that have needs that haven't filled them yet, and everyone's season is just around the corner. So I do expect the next few weeks to be very interesting all around. The good thing for Dortmund is the core of their business is done well before the season starts, and that is a huge relief, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think on that we can end the show, right? Lars, do you have any other things you wanted to address that are on your mind that you want to say in relation to Borussia Dortmund?
Maybe that I absolutely don't understand how Axel Witsel fell upwards to Atletico almost, because I'm not necessarily a huge Atletico fan, but Cholismo of Diego Simeone and the relaxed nature, let's say, of Chaloup Axel Witsel doesn't necessarily strike me as the most logical combination, but I suppose having that kind of experience might help them in some ways, which I'm not seeing right now.
All right. Okay. So, yeah, Matthias, unless you have any final thoughts, I would sign out.
No, I'm good.
Okay, so, as always, everyone out there, thank you for listening. Go to our YouTube page, The Yellow Wall, and subscribe so you get the BVB update every day. And other than that, thank you guys for coming on and helping me out record yet another episode. And I think we'll be back in either 1 week or 2 weeks, depending on how interesting the friendlies are and if there's much to discuss. And other than that, stay safe and thank you for listening. Goodbye.